He then repeatedly slapped him while yelling at him, "Are you alive?" It's clear from the evidence, Your Honor, Thomas was unconscious and injured, and the defendant failed to get him any help. He didn't even suggest it, nor did Angela Polina. He didn't even bring him inside where it was warm, despite knowing that Thomas fell because he was cold. And we will all never forget. Why did he fall? Because he was cold. Who fucking who? And he didn't call 911 until he had no choice but to call. Your Honor, I submit to you that child was cold, he was dead, and he was naked in that garage. When at 9:01 this defendant said, "Ange, could I talk to you for a second?" You heard it in his voice, we all heard it in his voice, and it was obvious by everything we all heard from the Nest video that at least as early at that moment, the defendant knew Thomas was dead, and it still took him another 39 minutes before he called 911. Your Honor, that only happened after he left Thomas dead and alone in the basement, an 8-year-old little boy. His body so cold to the touch, his lips blue, his heart in cardiac arrest, his exceedingly thin little 8-year-old body no longer breathing, while he and Angela concocted a story for the police for why there was a dead child in their basement, who, as we learned from Dr. Kaplan, should not have been dead, but for having succumbed to his hypothermic state, which the defendants created. Your Honor, that behavior, that complete and utter disregard for his son's life, deserves nothing less than the maximum sentence of 25 years to life. Your Honor, I would also ask you to please consider the defendant's lies on the day Thomas died, lies designed to protect himself and Angela Polina at the expense of Thomas's life. Please consider that he and Angela deleted Nest's video in an effort to save themselves, having done nothing at all to save Thomas Valva that morning. And please consider that when the police came to arrest him, he and Angela were nestled in their nice warm bed once again at 11 Bittersweet Lane, where they tortured their son to death. And please also consider, Your Honor, the defendant's great fortune, actually, that no matter what sentence you impose, he will have a cell with a bed and a blanket and a pillow and heat, as well as 3 meals a day, all the things he denied his children. And he won't have to take food out of the garbage or crumbs off the floor to survive the way Thomas and Anthony did. Your Honor, I have 2 final thoughts. First, maybe dressing 8-year-old Thomas as a prisoner on the last Halloween that 8-year-old was ever to enjoy, and I'll remind the court of the photo that you saw of Thomas dressed as a prisoner. Perhaps that was some kind of sick joke on the part of the defendant and Angela Polina, as it certainly symbolized Thomas's life, just as his red cheeks and hands, again, another photo that Your Honor saw during the trial, as his red cheeks and hands symbolized the cold he experienced. In the last photo ever taken of him by his teacher, Mrs. Wilson, the day before he died. I guess we'll never know if that's what they thought it was, just a joke. Sadly, though, it was also prophetic, because what we do know is that Thomas lived as a prisoner, given a death sentence that was executed, while this defendant may one day be offered the privilege of parole. Finally, Your Honor, in the PSI, the defendant said he wished he had done things differently. 25 years to life would certainly give him plenty of time to think about how a real father, shared DNA or not, would have acted under the same circumstances. He would have put his arms around his children and said, "It's us against the world." He would never have exiled his children to a cold garage where they slept in the dark with a life-size werewolf towering over them. He would have told his children he loved them instead of berating and beating them. and he would have clung to that lonely backpack in the garage as if his own life depended on it. Instead, Thomas's mother and brothers will miss Thomas, their son and brother, for the rest of their lives. For all these reasons, Your Honor, I recommend that the defendant at this time be sentenced to the maximum term of 25 years to life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Mr. LaTurco.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I also take the vote?
You may.
Thank you. First, Your Honor, I think we would be remiss if we didn't personally thank you for your 14 years of outstanding service to Suffolk County and New York State. You have personally presided over hundreds of my cases in your tenure, including 2 highly challenging and noteworthy trials, the Collateral Taylor case, and of course this case in particular. Now, although we didn't naturally always agree, you were consistently fair, you were congenial, compassionate, and open-minded. In short, you possess the ideal judicial temperament to preside over the most challenging criminal trials in this county, and it is a shame that you will be not returning in January to continue your greatness on the bench. You will be missed by all of us in the Suffolk County legal community, and we applaud you for an outstanding career here in Suffolk County, and we thank you for your time and your service. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you for that.
In reference to our client, Michael Valva, when Dan Russo, who was the 18B administrator here in Suffolk County, and Your Honor, asked me to accept the appointment to the Michael Valva case, I must admit that I had some hesitancy. But when I realized that Michael was unrepresented due to the reluctance by my fellow colleagues in the 18B panel, and I saw him go to court actually on News 12, unrepresented, that I felt an ethical obligation to Michael, as well as the overall sanctity of our legal system, to accept the assignment. And from the day that I met Michael Valva, I was glad that I accepted that assignment. Not only for Michael, but for the legal system itself, and to preserve the sanctity of our legal system. And I was thankful that my co-counsel, Anthony LaPinta, joined me, and eventually Sabato Capone as well. Now, what the public, and quite frankly the district attorney, never really had an opportunity to see from Michael Valva is what we got to see. And that is the hundreds of hours that we spent with Michael Valva behind closed doors. And that was at the Suffolk County Jail, meeting with Michael through the many phone calls, through video conferences, and that was the remorse. From the moment that I met Michael Valva, he was a broken man. At the trial, there was testimony and evidence to try to display that Michael Valva had no remorse for the loss of his son, Thomas, for the death of his son, Thomas. That was so far from reality. From the day that I met Michael, he was ashamed, broken, remorseful for his actions, omissions, and inactions. And he'll speak to that himself. But I hope that the public can understand that obviously this was not an intentional crime. that it was a crime, a convicted crime of recklessness, and of course, we may disagree with the jury's verdict of depraved indifference, and we had a theory of recklessness, and we should respect the jury's decision, but Michael never intended to cause the death of Thomas, and in our mind, he never wanted to see Thomas die. And he's going to have to live with that the rest of his life. No matter what your sentence is, he's already sentenced himself to a life of torment and regret. Michael loved all his boys. Despite his horrible parental deficiencies, he never foresaw contributing, that his actions or inactions contributed to the death of Thomas. Now, what we contend happened is that on the day of Thomas's tragic death, there was a perfect storm of uncontrolled outbursts and a series of poor decisions by Michael due to a steady culmination of highly stressful triggers. And we all saw it from the video and the audio evidence at the trial. Now, we all know what Ms. Kelly just stated about Michael's cold and callous statements regarding Thomas on the day of the incident. But this steady culmination of events were due to all these stressors in Michael's life. It wasn't that he despised Thomas in any way. He loved Thomas. And that day was a result of all these stresses. And it just boiled over until Michael just lost control on that day. Those statements didn't come from his heart. They came from his aggravation. Now, I'm not justifying or excusing his behavior and his statements and what happened on that day. I'm just offering an explanation which caused his recklessness and his foolish behavior and his actions and his inactions on that day. Because it's not an intentional crime. And he just didn't foresee the death of Thomas on that day. Now, naturally, we as Michael's defense team, we understand and expected the district attorney to ask for the maximum sentence, of course. Yet, again, it's not intentional murder, and we appreciate that the jury convicted Michael of the depraved indifference rather than the lesser included charges of manslaughter in the second degree or criminal negligent homicide. Yet, we contend there is a difference. There's a difference in the facts of this case, and we note, which the court is well aware of, there is a tremendous sentencing range that the court has the option of. 15 to life, 16 to life, all the way up to 25 to life. And you are a well-experienced judge who has presided over many murder trials, and you have the experience of sentencing people in disparate cases with disparate facts. Meaning that if you compare Michael's actions and inactions compared to cold-hearted murders, we think that Michael should have the benefit of not getting the maximum sentence. Looking at his background, for example, he was a New York City police officer for 15 years. He was a decorated police officer, numerous commendations. He was police officer of the month on numerous occasions. Yet he still cared for his family. You heard testimony at the trial that when he was in transit and he was working midnights, he tried to get transfers to become closer to his family so he wouldn't have to work midnights and be closer to home. Why? Because of all the things that was going on and the pressure that he was getting from his then fiancee and co-defendant, Angela Polina. Now, the district attorney complained that the only reason Michael fought so hard for custody was because he didn't want to make child support payments, but there's no evidence to support that. There's one text message from Angela Polina, and that's it. The evidence, on the other hand, is that he fought for years to maintain custody of his children, and that he was actually a good parent in many ways, despite all his parental deficiencies. He took his children to religious classes. He cared about their education. Now, you can disagree with all the other factors that he did and that he acquiesced to Angela's disciplinary methods. We understand that, and he's convicted of that. We're not retrying the case, but you also have to look at Michael Valva and his mindset. He thought that he was trying to do the right thing. Look at all those text messages. He thought in his mind that he was attempting to benefit his family, and that in his mind that overall, somehow, it was all going to work out in the end. Rightly or wrongly, he thought that in the end, it was going to work out, and his family and his sons were going to be in a better position in the end. And you can fault him for that, and obviously the jury did fault him for that, but in his mind, he never contemplated the injuries or the death of Thomas. He worked multiple jobs to support his family, while his co-defendant didn't work at all. He took his boys to football and sporting events. He cared for his children in his own way. He fought back at Polina's punishments. Now, there's no doubt that when you look at Michael Valva's choices and decisions and judgments in retrospect, it's easy to condemn him. But at the time, when dealing with the teachers, for example, he thought he was making the right decisions in his mind. And we also understand, Your Honor, that when you're contemplating your own sentencing options, we also appreciate that the public may expect a maximum sentence in such a notorious case. But that doesn't mean his conduct demands a maximum sentence. And we believe it does not. In fact, comparatively, we think otherwise. And we ask you to consider something less than the maximum and closer to the minimum. And we ask you to consider the evidence of remorse that was brought out in the trial. The hospital video, for example. It displayed him visibly upset immediately after seeing Thomas deceased at the hospital. We also ask you to consider the testimony of the New York City police officer, the union representative, after he had identified his son's body at the morgue, Michael was uncontrollably sobbing. Even Detective Flores, the lead detective in this case, said Michael was crying during the interview process at the hospital. Ms. Kelly indicated that Michael did nothing to assist Thomas on the day of the incident. And she talked about the cover-up and that how Thomas had been deceased in the garage. We're not here to retry the case, but we contest that. We contest that. We claim that Michael actually did attempt to revive Thomas on that day, that he called 911, that he performed CPR. Now, that was not an element for the jury to consider what actually happened, but we believe that Michael, in good faith, attempted to revive young Thomas, and he did give him a shower. And what evidence is there to prove that? Well, if you consider Dr. Kaplan's testimony in of itself, there was still feces on Thomas during the autopsy. And if there was a shower, how would that, there was not feces on him any longer. So if there was a shower, how would that not have happened? So there's evidence that there was a shower. We think that's strong evidence to suggest that Michael did give him a shower, and that this cover-up did not occur. In short, Your Honor, we know you have a difficult task, and we know it's your last case here in criminal court. And we ask that under the totality of the circumstances and comparatively, Michael's case to many other murder cases that you've sat in front of, we ask you to consider something less than the maximum, respectfully. And again, Your Honor, for all of us at the defense table, we thank you for your time and your invaluable service to Suffolk County. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Laturco. Mr. Valva, do you wish to be heard?
Yes, Your Honor.
If you wish, you can stand and address the court or stay seated. It's your choice.
I'll stand up, Your Honor. Your Honor, first I want to express to you and everyone involved in this case, sorry, that I am truly sorry. I am regretful, ashamed, heartbroken and grief-stricken, standing here before you, having contributed to the death of my son Thomas. I love Thomas with all my heart, as I still love Anthony and Andrew. Never in my worst nightmare would I imagine being responsible for Thomas's death. My sons mean everything to me. I wanted them to grow up in a loving and happy family. I fought so hard to obtain custody for my boys because I wanted to give them the best life that they could possibly have, together with my fiancée and her 3 daughters. We had such a promising and exciting future together as one big happy family. Yet our family didn't grow as I expected. I'm sorry. As it became more and more difficult to all live together, I terribly failed my boys instead of providing them with unconditional love, support, and a home that was safe, comfortable, and nurturing. My actions were neglectful and abusive to my boys, resulting in the tragic death of Thomas. I'm sorry. I lost focus on how to be a good father. Instead of simply leaving Angela and bringing my boys out of that house, I stayed thinking I could make it work. I was so wrong. Judge Condon, I did not want my son to die. I never imagined he would have died. However, I lost my way and convinced myself that punishments were temporary and eventually would get us back to normal. I was so wrong, and it cost Thomas his life. I am so sorry to Thomas, Anthony and Andrew, and to Delana, Milana, and Gia, and everybody involved in this case. I apologize to all the teachers at East Mauritius School District, the CPS workers, and all persons negatively impacted by my actions. I am also deeply sorry to Justina, as she also lost a son. Despite our differences, I recognize her loss and her everlasting grief. Your Honor, I accept your sentence, as I already sentenced myself to a lifetime filled with extreme regret, remorse, and grief. And finally, I'd like to thank my lawyers for all their tireless efforts and help on my behalf. John Laturco, Anthony LaPinta, and Sabato Capone. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Valva. I did so at the conclusion of the trial. I think it's worth saying it again, that all 6 of these attorneys, I know how hard all of you worked. This was the most stressful trial I've ever been a part of, as either a lawyer or a judge. And I acknowledge Mr. Laturco, Mr. LaPinta, Mr. Capone took this case when many other lawyers would not. And I respect that. And I respect your dedication to the legal system.
Thank you.
And I'm going to extend that commendation to the staff here as well. Everybody who took part in this trial lost sleep, didn't eat, had nightmares. It was difficult for everyone. One question still beguiles me, though. How did all of us, as a community, allow this to happen? And I acknowledge this is not the appropriate forum to have that discussion, but it needs to happen. And in saying that, I am in no way impugning the good teachers and administrators at East Moriches. Anybody who watched this trial knows that the tears that flowed from that witness stand were genuine. Those teachers and administrators cared. They certainly tried. I appreciate your, and I think you are sincere in saying that you're sorry, Mr. Valva. I really do. And I don't think you intended to kill Thomas, not at all. In fact, you were not charged with intentionally killing him. But there's no getting around the fact that Thomas and Anthony lived their young lives under constant duress in the place where they should have felt safest, their own home. I'm going to quote from the pre-sentence report, quote, "The events that eventually led to the victim's death were the result of a culmination of decisions and behaviors over an extended period of time. Despite being made aware of his children's declining conditions, the defendant persisted in his abusive ways. Rather than be his children's protector, he was a warden who starved and abusively punished them. And when one considers that Mr. Valva had a career as a New York City police officer, it makes your actions that much more unimaginable, to be candid. An 8-year-old boy who right now should be getting excited for Christmas is dead. I speak to everybody out there. We can never let this happen again. And that's all I'll say from this bench. Consistent with the recommendation of the probation department, the court hereby sentences the defendant to an indeterminate sentence. The minimum being 25 years, the maximum being the remainder of his natural life. That's on count 1 of murder 2. With respect to the endangering counts 2 through 5, defendant is sentenced to 1 year in the Suffolk County Jail on each of those counts. As I'm sure you're all aware, by operation of law, those sentences merge with the sentence under the top count. Defendant is to be given credit for time already served. We will convert all incidentals to judgment. I have also signed an order, it's likely moot at this point, that Mr. Valva surrender any and all firearms, rifles, and shotguns pursuant to Criminal Procedure Law Section 370-25. No. I inquired about permanent orders of protection. Ms. Kelly has informed me. There are pending orders in family court. People are not seeking same at this time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The foregoing constitutes the sentence of the court. Criminal term part 3 is hereby adjourned permanently.
And there you have it. Michael Valva sentenced to 25 years to life. Joining me now to talk about the sentencing is Newsday Associate Editor Joy Brown. So Joy, let's start with the punishment here. This was a disturbing case on many levels. So let's dissect this a bit and let's talk about the sentences where the Assistant DA, Carrie Ann Kelly, she pulled no punches.
She pulled absolutely no punches. She actually said tortured 3 times. And I just want to point out that the word torture was actually used 4 times in this sentencing procedure. The 4th time when Michael Valva's lawyer said that he had already sentenced himself to a tortured life. But what ADA Carrie Ann Kelly was talking about was that young child, the last few months, days, hours of his life. She didn't describe it as abuse. She was very, very specific. She went into specific terms. She used the term torture. And in talking to Judge Condon, she went point by point in what some of that torture entailed.
Now, let's also talk about defense attorney John Turco talking how he opened up thanking the judge about his service because it's the judge's last case. He also mentioned that no other attorneys would take this case, but he also really leaned into the fact that Valva was under stress, that this was a man who boiled over. What do you think he was doing there?
Well, a couple of things are going on here, I think. One, he's sort of laying the foundation in case they want to appeal the sentence, right? That if he had remorse for what he did, if he didn't have an intention for what he did, that perhaps, that is, if they decide to appeal the sentence, he should get less than the max of what he got, which is 25 years to life. But there's another side of this, and I think we heard it from both the prosecution and the defense, which pretty much amounts to a preview of the upcoming trial of his former fiancée, Angelina Polina. We heard what she did. He talks about, it was very interesting when Michael Valva spoke. He said that he had a piece of what was involved. He didn't take full responsibility, that I participated in, I had a part in. So we're also seeing a preview of what's to come down the line here.
Let's talk more about what Valva said, because obviously he gave his statement too. He was emotional this time. He also said that he loved Thomas with all my heart. How do you feel that came across after so much evidence and the end of this case?
Well, you know, the judge agreed with him that he felt that he loved Thomas. The judge agreed that that Michael Valva did not intentionally kill his son. In fact, the judge said, basically, you weren't charged with intentionally killing your son, so you believe that. But, and again, you know, this is the first time he's going on. He went and he apologized. He apologized to the teachers. He apologized to the CPS workers. He apologized to his former wife, Justina. this is the most we've seen him. You know, his voice broke. During the whole trial, his face looked ashen. Now, did he cry? Did he not cry? I couldn't tell one way or the other from being in there, but this is, in fact, the most emotion that he has shown and demonstrated during this entire time.
Let's talk about emotion for a moment, because when the judge was saying his piece, he mentioned how much stress this caused for not only the attorneys, but also the staff. He said at one point the staff were having nightmares over this case. And one of the quotes that he mentioned, I think that stuck with a lot of folks who watched this, was there's an 8-year-old boy that was supposed to be excited for Christmas, and that boy is no longer here. What do you think the judge was coming across?
Well, what the judge is actually hitting on the point that everybody should be hitting on. And to me, he took it even harder when he said, how did all of us as a county allow this to happen? Because as the trial made clear, child psychologists, nurses, teachers, police officers, family members, friends, CPS workers, even judges, all knew in some form or fashion, or had heard in some form or fashion, allegations that Thomas and his brother were being abused in this household. And yet, we still end up on January 17th with an 8-year-old sleeping on an unheated floor, 19 degrees at night. And I think that, you know, Carrie Ann Kelly put it there. She said that on the day that he died, that Michael and Angela, they left as she said he was cold, dead body on the floor of that garage. I mean, just no wonder people were having nightmares. And the judge did make the case that this was a tough case for everybody. You know, again, you heard from the defense attorneys, nobody wanted to touch this case. No. Nobody wanted to defend this guy in here. But again, I just want to hammer home another thing that the judge said, which is we can never let this happen again.
Now let's talk about the sentencing. 25 years to life. What other sentencing? What other did he get? I believe it was 1 year for each other.
Well,
count.
again, everything is going to be kind of commingled together. On the top count, he got the max sentence. There were other additional counts there. The judge said 1 year in the Suffolk County Jail, but they'll all be put in together. It's not going to add a single day to his natural life or take a day away from his natural life, but he will be there an indeterminate time, 25 to the term of his natural life.
All right, what happens next?
Well, what happens next is we've got, well, I guess I would ask the question, is this case over? And not by a long shot. Again, we've got the upcoming trial of Angela Polina coming, and you've heard text messages during this trial, some pretty awful things during this trial. There were 2 people on that text message.
Yeah.
We got the trial of Michael. We'll be hearing more about this during the trial of Angela. In addition to that, Michael's mom has filed a suit in civil court alleging that, you know, CPS workers, Suffolk County, that they all did not do their jobs and kind of stood by as her son was tortured.
Absolutely amazing. We heard it here first. Newsday TV, Michael Valva sentenced 25 years to life and then some. Thank you so much for your insight and your wisdom on this. And thank you for watching Newsday TV.